ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಅಂತಾರಾಷ್ಟ್ರೀಯ ಕಿರುಚಿತ್ರೋತ್ಸವಕ್ಕೆ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಸ್ವಾಗತ. ದೇಹವೊಂದು ದೇವವೀಣೆ, ನರ ನರವು ತಂತಿತಾನೆ. ದೇಹವೊಂದು ದೇವವೀಣೆ, ನರ ನರವು ತಂತಿತಾನೆ. ಹಗಲಿರುಳು ನಡೆಯುತ್ತಿಹ ಉಸಿರಾಟವೇ ಗೀತ. ಅದ ಬಾರಿಸೆ ನೀ ಪ್ರವೀಣೆ, ತಾಯಿ ನಿನ್ನ ಕೈಗೆ ನಾನೇ ಒಪ್ಪಿಸಿಕೊಂಡಿಹೆನು ಬರಲಿ ಜೀವನ ಸಂಗೀತ. ದೇಹವೊಂದು ದೇವವೀಣೆ, ನರ ನರವು ತಂತಿತಾನೆ. ಮನದ ಮಲೆಯ ತುದಿ ತುದಿಯಲಿ ಮೌನದ ಸುಪ್ತೋದದಿಯಲಿ. ಮನದ ಮಲೆಯ ತುದಿ ತುದಿಯಲಿ ಮೌನದ ಸುಪ್ತೋದದಿಯಲಿ. ಏಳಲಿ ಅಲೆನವತಾರೆಯ ಕಿರಣಾವಲಿಯಂತೆ. ಏಳಲಿ ಅಲೆನವತಾರೆಯ ಕಿರಣಾವಲಿಯಂತೆ. ಈಗೋ ಚಿತ್ತದ ಯಾವುದೋ ಸ್ಮೃತಿ ಸುಳಿಸುತ್ತಿದೆ ವಿದ್ಯಾರತಿ. ಈಗೋ ಚಿತ್ತದ ಯಾವುದೋ ಸ್ಮೃತಿ ಸುಳಿಸುತ್ತಿದೆ ವಿದ್ಯಾರತಿ. ಮೈ ಮನವು ಪ್ರಾಣ ಪಥದಿ ನಲಿ ನಲಿವಂತೆ. ಮೈ ಮನವು ಪ್ರಾಣ ಪಥದಿ ನಲಿ ನಲಿವಂತೆ. ದೇಹವೊಂದು ದೇವವೀಣೆ, ನರ ನರವು
I'm an actor and director for stage and films. I've been lucky to have been part of the founding team that started this festival 10 years ago in Bengaluru. And at that time they were all boys. They built this into this fantastic international event. Oscar Academy recognized festival, the only one of the kind in India for short films. And we've had the best of people visiting us with their films, with their workshops, and we're going to miss a lot of what it meant for us all to congregate during these 3 or 4 days of the festival. It had a festive, genuine festive atmosphere with a lot of young people, first-time filmmakers, for not so young, but all kinds of people just with so much enthusiasm gathering in one place, asking questions, quarreling with criticism. We're going to miss that. We're going to miss that physical presence this year. It's been very depressing, especially for artists, to be first alienated from our audiences and then even to be alienated from the society from which we can get our stories. But nevertheless, we're trying to make the best use of this problem because it presents us with opportunities to go national and even international with interaction. So you are where you are watching our programs and our films, and we are where we are feeding the content to you virtually, and we'll use this festival and this time to renew our promise to be the platform that helps passionate young filmmakers, passionate first-time filmmakers to come together in a collective to talk to each other, quarrel with each other, talk, film, film, film. So enjoy the festival. Have a great time. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Depending on which part of the world you are in, good morning, good afternoon, and good day. Thank you very much for joining us on this very special edition of the festival, the Bengaluru International Short Film Festival. We complete a decade this year, and as fate would have it, we explore a new domain this year and we completely move online. The pandemic forced the team to work on technology neutral forms of support. Online streaming and home cinema systems are now part of our everyday lives, and Festival hopes to be part of it this year. In the coming 4 days of this festival, we will have a chance to sink into our sofa seats, experience films in the company of a drink, snacks, and keyboard. The conversation of cinema will continue, but in the forms of likes and comments, which will be completely online. Art imitates life, and life imitates art. Cinema takes us on a journey of magic with twists and turns, a sense of longing, disappointments. But just as in all cases, we are seeking for something. The story does not foretell its own revelation. Just like life, we need to wait for it. I hope this festival furthers the journey a little more further for all of us. On behalf of my unwavering team who made this impossible task completely possible, I welcome you to a filmmaker's journey via the Bangalore International Short Film Festival. Finally, I would like to thank the creators for their work: Center for Film and Drama, Suchitra, Gothe Institute, Max Muller Bhavan, Shorts TV, Katte Films and Entertainment, Pocket Films, ALMT Legal, all the distributors and organizers, and everyone who worked to bring these films to viewers. With this digital medium, we are excited to welcome more and more viewers who want to access to a wonderful defining content. Now, I request our guest of honor, Ruben Ostlund, to open the festival. Ruben, it's to you.
Okay, thanks for the honor to open Bangalore International Short Film Festival. Hereby, I declare the festival open.
Is that good?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I came to Sweden for the first time in 2008, and I've come there many times since. And when I came there in 2008 or early 2009, I forget, I was given a copy of your first film. I think it was called Involuntary.
Yeah.
In English.
It's actually my second film. My second film, but yeah.
I was quite struck by that film because I thought this was a very angry film, and I said as much to the film school that had given it to me, and they were very proud of you because you were a graduate from that film school. But when I came back to Sweden for the Gothenburg Film Festival, subsequently, they were premiering your film Play, and I've seen that film maybe half a dozen times already, and I'm really struck by that film. Mm-hmm. I saw Square also, but I saw only a little bit of it. I mean, I missed a little bit of it because I saw it on a flight, and they cut off the film because they were going to land, and I couldn't see the end of the film. So I just wanted to tell you that I've seen some of your films, and my strongest impression of you is from the film Play. But I'm going to talk not about your films, but I'm going to talk about what I think are your concerns, specifically with reference to the context that we are in India and my city, Bangalore. Is that okay?
Sure.
I just saw while I was looking for some reference, one of the interviews that you've done, I think in Britain it was, you say that you're really bothered about the question of social contract. And
yes,
and in Play, I've when the fight is happening in the train, when the boy is getting beaten up by the other boys, you don't move the camera because they go off the frame and they come back into the frame sometimes, and finally, when you do see the boy, he's actually been beaten very badly. And it's as though it's a surveillance camera in the train, which is not really concerned, which has no empathy for what is happening. It can just record. It cannot bother beyond that. And I felt really struck by that idea of how we behave on the street. Because sometimes, I just say one personal example. Once I was driving back home from somewhere, it was past midnight, and there was a woman screaming in the park next to the road. And I thought I should stop and do something about it. But I also kept thinking of stories I've been hearing about on that street, particularly, that women actually con you and you get robbed because somebody else comes. And I thought whether I should stop or I should drive past. And all I did, I'm ashamed to say, was drive past. And but the next morning, I looked at the paper and I saw that nothing had happened actually. But your film really bothered me. And this is a long question, but I'm going to let you speak because my problem is that when this COVID pandemic happened to us, a lot of people, because Bangalore is a booming city, its economy has been booming for the last 20 years. We've been growing at 10 to 11% every year. And a lot of contract migrant workers from other states, poorer states of India, come and find jobs here. But because it's such a crooked system, they don't get employed by correct contract. They don't get health benefits, they don't get leave, they don't get housing and sanitation, schooling for the children. None of those contracts are fulfilled. And they don't even get reflected in the payroll. So when the pandemic happened and we announced a lockdown, they were suddenly cut off from any means of sustenance. And the system couldn't support it because they were not on the record. And they all went back to their villages. And it was really brutal because it was a mass migration and displacement. Many of them died on the way. And I feel, what is the point of art, of film or theater or anything that we do, if we cannot connect with this? And I'm not saying it like a bleeding heart liberal because I'm not known to be a liberal person. I'm just thinking, what kind of contract do we make in the communities that we live in? When we say identity, can we say it's an autonomous identity? Are we not an ethnocentric identity? Do we even acknowledge that? And I see that kind of question bothering you, I think, in your cinema. And I want to talk about that. I want to listen to what you say.
Well, the first thing I think about when you bring up this topic is the starting point of play and the reason that I wanted to make play. And I mean, Gothenburg that I live in is a quite segregated city. It's one of the more segregated in Europe, I would say. So the rich people live on one side of the river, and the poor people, the immigrants and so on, they live on the other side of the river. And the reason that I got to know about this event, because play is inspired of true events, was that I read an article about 5 boys that was traveling from their suburb into the center of the city, where they were spotting out young middle class kids that they could see that were in the center of the city for the first time. And they robbed them with a rhetorical trap. Like they were saying, okay, my kid got robbed the other day. Can I look at your cell phone? And of course, the victims understood this is a trap, but still they didn't do anything else but dare to show them the cell phone. And then they said, okay, just go. This is my kid brother's cell phone. Let's go and show it to him. And if you have not stolen it, it's okay. Then you can go. But otherwise, we have to give it to him. So, but for me, it was so obvious that, like, okay, the kids from 2 different parts of the city was gathering up the center of Gothenburg in the mall, where they go shopping, where they go like buying a computer game. I don't know. And both of these groups had prejudice about each other. So the robbers had prejudice about the kids that came from the richer part, and the rich kids had prejudice about the kids that comes from the not so wealthy parts of the city. And the robbers that were black, even though they were very young, they understood how to use their skin color as an unoutspoken threat. So they were like 12 and 14 years old, and still, since they have all these references from mainstream media, from American culture, from Anglo-Saxon culture, the black skin color was connected with like a dangerous man. So they used this in order to create this rhetorical trap. So that was something that I was interested in when it came to play. So there was like a social situation that made it possible for these boys to fulfill the robberies. And when these robberies took place, they took place in a mall in the center of the city. And similar to what you were telling me about this woman that was screaming, it was broad daylight, and it was a lot of people around when these robberies were happening. And even though it was like sometimes an adult walking by 2 meters away, the kids that were robbed, they didn't grab this person. They didn't ask for help. And the adults that saw that something strange was happening, they were not confronting the kids. So you could tell that the social contract of that city have changed in some way if I compare it to what my father told me about his upbringing. Because when my father was around 6 years old, his parents put an address tag around his neck and sent him out on the streets to play. And back then, in the 40s, then you looked at other parents or other adults as someone that would help your children if they ended up in trouble. But today, you almost can say that attitude that towards other adults is that we think that they are a possible threat to our children. So the children was not asking for help, and the parents were not interacting either, or the other adults was not interacting either. So the social contract of Sweden have changed a lot since the 40s. You can tell them. And if I look like on a city like Gothenburg, I think Bangalore is probably quite similar. When you go into the central city, the land is owned by the shops, it's owned by the cafeterias. It's something that we don't feel that's our responsibility. And it's interesting to look on how we look on where is our responsibility. Is the city our responsibility, or is it someone else? Is it the authorities? Is it the state that should take the responsibility for this? Or is it me as a fellow human being that also have a responsibility? And when it came to play, it was really like the kids' world were taking place on one level, and the adult's world was taking place on another level. And during the time that we were doing play, since I'm very interested in sociology, and I mean, sociology, you have a term that is pointing out the reason that we become passive when it comes to these public spaces, and it's a bystander effect. And the bystander effect is, of course, like that the more people we are, for an example, in a square and something is happening, the more people we are, the less likable it is that we are taking responsibility. Instead, we think it's someone else's responsibility. The fewer people we are, the more likable it is that we will take responsibility. So this isn't a consequence of that the human being is a herd animal. And when we were doing the play, that's actually the point where the idea for the square came up. Because me and a friend of mine that is called Kalle Boman, we came up with the idea that we should create a symbolic place where we can get reminded about the social contract, where we can get reminded about it's my responsibility to take action. And we created this symbolic place like a white mark square. And the idea was that we should build strong rules around it, comparable with a pedestrian crossing. I mean, a pedestrian crossing is a fantastic example when we have managed to create a strong social contract around how we should behave. Like with this couple of lines in the street, the pedestrians, this car should stop for the pedestrians. And our idea was to create something that is just as simple and build a contract that if someone is standing in the square, it's my obligation to address this person. It's my obligation to stop up and say, hey, you're standing in the square, how can I help you? So yeah, I've been interested in this topic for a long time. And I think it's also interesting to look at it because I think it's differences between, for example, Swedish social contract to French social contract, probably to Bangladesh, India social contract, and how we look on our responsibilities and what is socially accepted. And I can tell you, for an example, in Sweden, you can put a baby trolley with a child in it outside the cafeteria when you're inside the cafeteria to have a coffee. So you can sit there and like, okay, no, take a baby. You know, like the social contract is you don't steal a baby. And we trust in other people that they will not do that. And if you go to the US and you do the same thing, probably they will think the authorities will take the baby away from you because you're not handling it in the right way. So it's interesting to talk about this social contract because very often I think also we think that this perception on each other is fixed, that it's not possible to change, that it's not possible to build a new social contract. But I think it's very, very important to try to remain a social contract where we trust in each other. Because if we give trust, we get care back. And if we mistrust, I think then the consequence of that would be that if someone is not careful, we will use that exposed situation. So mistrust is going to give us bad behavior back, good behavior back.
Okay, you know, Mr. Rosalind, I want to pose this question to you because you're an artist. You've chosen to be a filmmaker. You're responsive and sensitive to your society, critical of it in your films sometimes. And satirical about it many times. My point is this, you know, we have a paradox here. You know, when I was in Gothenburg talking to students, I was praising your film, and one student got up, turned to me and said, you're racist to me because I was praising some aspect of your film. Oh, I just lost you for a bit. Okay. And they said, you know, I was being racist by actually admiring your film. And, you know, we have, you know, your film can be provocative and it looks controversial. I'm talking about play again. You know, I will tell you the paradox in India. I don't know how it's in Sweden. We have an explosion. I'm sorry, the network is misbehaving because it's raining. There's an explosion. There's an explosion of concern on social media about what's happening in the world, but there is also an explosion of
amateur video, because everybody has a camera with them all the time now and they shoot stuff. And we get videos in India where somebody's had a road accident. And the girl, I saw a video yesterday of some shared it on social media that a girl has fallen off a two-wheeler and she's writing, she's struggling in the road and she's moaning, and there's a crowd around her and they're filming it. You know, they've taken, somebody has a camera and some people have mobile phones. I'm saying this thing is, we are desensitized about this being who we are. That's why I asked you this question about individual in our society. So I'm coming to the question of what is an artist in a society? What are we supposed to react to? We do so much sensitivity when we do a formal comment about what's happening with our societies. But in a day-to-day thing, we don't seem to bother at all. Just like you said, we have this bystander effect. We just don't care. Why do you think this happens to us? And does it? How should an artist relate to this?
First of all, I would like to say that I think that human being is really, really good in collaborating and taking care of each other. That is probably one of the most, how to say, one of the strongest character of being a human being. We are actually super good in collaborating.
I'm sorry. Could you say that again? We missed that bit with the opening bit.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out, because I believe that human being is actually really good in collaborating and really good in taking care of each other. But at the same time, we are living in a time where we have an algorithm run the media and internet that is constantly bringing us these very, how to say, explosive, tragical stories. So we are today, when we are like what we are looking at on the internet or in the media, is going to portray the human being as like we are completely awful. And I think we have to remind ourselves that we actually are really, really good in collaborating and helping each other, first of all. So all the examples that we see in internet or in media or catch on film is not saying the truth about us. I think it's interesting when you said about these people were stopping up and starting to film. There was like this accident. And this is something that also I think we have to bring it down to sociology to discuss it, because when human being gets a camera, we get passive also. Then it's like almost like we are distancing ourselves and looking at it from a distance. And also, since we know that this can make us become a currency if we are filming an explosive dramatic event, then we are starting to think about how this currency can be used for ourselves. We have had the same problem in Sweden, for example, when fireman is trying to get a person that is drowning up on the beach, and it's so many people standing there with the cameras and watching and just filming and not moving away so they can get space. You know, in this point, I think it's very important to not put guilt on the individual. We should just try to create knowledge. We should just try to create knowledge from a sociological perspective. Try to remind people of, if you're filming, think about what are you doing now? Are you going to stand in the way? Are you going to be a passive? Are you going to be a bystander? We need to know about sociology to break this pattern. And so to bring it back to like the times we live in, for an example, where if there is not a conflict, there's not a news. If there's not a conflict,
I'm sorry, we lost you for a while. So
yeah, no problem. No, but what we talked about.
No, you were saying that people are really good at collaborating, and you said we shouldn't point to the individual. We should actually bring awareness to what you were saying.
And I think that what we're living in today is not only a pandemic that comes from COVID-19, but we also live in a media pandemic, an information pandemic, an internet pandemic, where we are constantly like how to say, exposed for the most dramatic, the biggest conflict, the most explosive images. And if we are starting to use this when we look at each other, then I think that we will create a very bad social contract. Then we will actually think that human being is like this. But we are only seeing the extreme examples. Because the one that is not extreme, they will never break through this algorithm. They will never reach us. So it becomes and how to say, a description of human being that I don't believe in.
Ruben, I wanted to say that I'm very struck by that idea that you've just mentioned, because I feel that we are very articulate, and we become very passionate when we are defending big ideologies, big ethical questions, but we are completely inconsiderate when it comes to small things, small decencies and scruples. For instance, Anand just showed me a scene from your film Force Majeure, where the avalanche is coming, and because it's a small indecency that that he doesn't care for the child and he gets up and goes. And these are the big questions you're saying. I so admire you for even thinking like that, because you do this all the time. There is this insufferable politeness of saying, who left the pram in the train, where whose pram is it, and everybody is just making fun of it, and one person is desperately polite. And it's I see that you're so seeing when it comes to something small. And I think you're right, it's not the extreme, it is the middle, the real small things that can fix it, perhaps. And how should a filmmaker, especially people who make short films, they're just starting out, many of them, they should think, what is it that they want to film, and why should they want to film it?
Yeah, I think that one thing that has been important to me is to always look on what kind of experience do I have that I remember. What incidents have happened in my life that I remember? And those incidents, there's a reason why I remember them. There's a reason why I thought they were strong. And my advice to filmmakers is trust 100% in that experience is important, and it's something that you have to express. That is the unique thing that you can do. You had a strong impression of something, and you have to trust that this also means something to other people. Because this is the reason why we should do art. We should share experiences of things that we have, either some friend of us, our family, or someone that is close to us, and bring it out to other people. We should not reproduce other images. We all live in a world where we are reproducing the same characters, the same storylines, the same cliches. The goal as a filmmaker, as an artist, is to make the world more nuanced, to give another perspective and another perspective and another perspective. And the goal as a filmmaker is to manage to get your point of view to get as much as attention as possible. But stay true.
That is true of literature, for instance. Actually, people who write poetry, or even people who write novels, will write completely personal, subjective novels. But somehow when it comes to cinema, because it fixes the image, it fixes the idea of experience itself in some ways, it makes memes out of experience itself in some ways. I think people don't have the courage to tell completely personal stories. Do you agree?
I think that we have been trained also to look at the cinema production and the cinema industry in a certain way. It's a mass medium, and it have always been a mass medium. And then it also have different challenges in order to keep what is true to you and not take away the edges and make it into some, how to say, product that is easy to swallow. But I think this is very important when it comes to the film schools, that from day one you have to teach the students, trust what you feel is important, trust what you feel is important, because otherwise there's no reason that you're a director. Otherwise, you know, like if you don't trust your instrument as a director, why should you be a director? You have to take your own feelings, your own experience. Like that is the most important thing you have. And the older you get, the better filmmaker you can be, because you can also understand life and social contracts, social bonds, what it is to be old, what it is to experience your child's first birth, etc., etc. So the experience is what you should be used in art. And I think it's what we are dealing with now is kind of interesting, because if you look at the big internet platforms like Netflix, etc., etc., and if you look at the cinema distribution, the bigger player we have, the bigger the players are, the bigger these companies are, the less interested they will be in quality, the less interested they will be in the truth about being a human being. And the reason because of that, because it's just hard to train an audience to see nuances. It's much better to have an audience that is just expecting sugar, because then you can make an economical calculation of making a film. But for example, if you look at the cinemas today, I think back in 20, 30 years, a film that had a box office the first weekend for $20 million, let's just say a number. The second weekend, they had a box office in $19 million. Today, they have let's say we have a film that have a box office $20 million the first weekend. They have a box office the second weekend, $5 million. So it's very hard to make a film that is like staying with the audience, and the audience is buying tickets to it every weekend. So it becomes much better to take a concept that is very strong, for example, X-Men, or maybe you heard about this emoji movie, because it's the concept that is going to make the people go to the cinema the first weekend. And the second weekend, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. It will drop to five anyway. There are exceptions to these, but in general, if you look at the competition at the cinema, there's so many movies. So it's much better to go for a very strong known concept and do a shit movie that doesn't cost any money, because it will drop anyway. So films have become an economical calculation even more these days than it was like 30 years ago or whatever. But I think
what does a passionate filmmaker do then? What is the way out for a young filmmaker?
That is really to take that challenge, you know, because I think that the fun part of filmmaking is to have a content that you believe in, and then to win attention for it. And for an example, if you look at the film festivals, like your film festival in Bangalore or in Cannes Film Festival, the festivals is a great opportunity to try to break through and meet an audience. And it's a great also, how to say, motivation for us filmmakers. But on the film school in Gothenburg, I think that how I talk to the students is, okay, if you believe in your content is important, then you have to fight with these Marvel movies. You have to try to get attention. You have to take some of the audience from these Marvel movies. And I think when I was in film school, maybe in the beginning of the 98, almost in the millennium, then it was an attitude at the film school that was like, well, we are creating art, and art is like it has a different value. I don't believe in that, you know. I believe in something that I think is true about us human beings, and things that I don't think is true about us human beings. And I think that what our goal is to create maximum attention for the truth, what we believe in, and have fun with that challenge. You know, okay, you have to be smart with that challenge. You have to be speculative. If you want to have your film premiered in Cannes, you have to be speculative. You have to get the right distributor that have the right contact with Cannes. You have to get an actor that can go on the red carpet. You know, it's very simple. It's very materialistic. If Cannes is presenting a movie, they need a big star going on the red carpet. So art in itself is about truth, but it also can include being speculative to win the attention, you know?
Absolutely. You know, I want to tell you this, that in Singapore, they ran a survey during the lockdown. They said that which of these fields, sectors of production or industry or whatever it is, services, which of these sectors of the economy are least useful or most useful. And artists ranked 72%, they said, of the people surveyed said artists are the least useful people in society.
Yeah.
You know, and I think instead of being depressed, I think there is a way of looking at why we became so alienated from our public. Do you think it's important to introspect on that?
I can tell you one thing. We have to remind ourselves that the images that we see is creating who we are. I think that the images that we see in the cinema, the books that we read, etc., are creating who we are. But we don't look at the culture sector that have this influence of human being, and I think that is a huge mistake. If we don't believe that the culture that we are living in and the impressions that we get is shaping us as human beings, we are doing a great mistake. And I just wanted to take an example that I've been talking about before, how images is creating behavior, how images is changing our perception of life. And it was Robert Saviano, the author of Gomorrah. He was interviewed in a Swedish newspaper. And you know Gomorrah, the book that is about mafia in Neapel. And he said that half a year after a Quentin Tarantino movie was released in the world, the young gangsters in Neapel, they started to shoot with a gun on the side like this. And the consequences of that, they were so influenced by this movie. So they wanted to be cool, you know, and shoot with a gun on the side and blah, blah, blah. And the consequence of that, it is that it's much harder to hit the enemy. So the shootouts became much more bloody, and the police had a mess cleaning up afterwards. It's just a very clear example. I don't know if it's an anecdote or not, but still, it's an example of how human being imitates art. And if we don't believe then that art is important, that is kind of dangerous actually, because then we think that we can look on anything and it will not influence us. But of course it will influence us. You know, like studies about like rom-coms, romantic comedies, that people that like to watch them, they divorce more than other people. So couples that love to look at rom-coms actually increases the risk that you will divorce. So we have to look on what kind of influence art and movies and books have on us. And if we only have movies as believe that it's only entertainment, that it's not creating behavior, of course, then people will think, what should we use this for? What is it useful for? Why is it important?
I must give you an example that this was many years ago, maybe 20, 25 years ago. There was this movie called Mississippi Burning. It was a Ku Klux Klan in the US. You know, it's a film where a bunch of white people gather for a party, and for fun they tie up a black man, and then they let him go and they chase him and lynch him. That's the story. And we heard in those days, I'm saying this was the pre-internet days for us. We heard that when the film was screened in some parts of redneck America, the public was cheering when the man was being chased. So I think this idea of being so removed from the society you are is a big problem. And there's also a big problem if you stay away from society and criticize it. We have a concept of the critical insider, you know, we discuss here, saying you can be inside your society and then criticize it. Because if you stand outside and criticize, nobody cares then. So what becomes the responsibility then? I mean, you're you were seen as a controversial filmmaker when you started out, before you're so valorized with international recognition.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that the responsibility as an artist is the same as I have as a human being. I don't lie to a person that I meet. When I have a conversation with someone that I meet, I don't start to make up stories and scare this person with fairy tales that doesn't exist. I don't tell them things that will make it harder for them to understand how to behave. And for me, it's the same thing when it comes to art. I have to think that what I'm saying here, I believe in, is true, and it's something that I think is needed to change the world in a certain way. I think that everything that we communicate, we want to push the situation in some direction. Like, for example, if I sit around a table and my family is fighting, and if I'm saying something, either I trust the one side and I want no, this side is actually right. Maybe I want them to calm down. The same thing with the world. We have to look at the world. We have to look at our society. What is needed right now? And and we also have to start criticizing movies in this way. We have to say when we see film, excuse me, I don't need this content one more time. What should I do with this content? I already have seen it. And I think that it's interesting if we talk about, sometimes people say to me, but come on, it's just a movie. Why can't we just be entertained? Why can't we entertain ourselves? And I can understand that. If you have been working a lot, you're tired, you come home, and you can just use the TV as something that's like, streaming through your head. But I think it's interesting to draw a parallel to a book that is called A Brave New Day. And it's about, am I saying the right title now? Sorry. I think
Brave New World?
A Brave New World, exactly. Yeah. And
Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley.
Yeah. And there was someone named 1984. Someone wrote a thesis, wrote an article about 1984, the book by George Orwell, and A Brave New World.
Okay.
Yeah. And he was saying, actually, we avoided to end up in the totalitarian scary future of the 1984, but we ended up in A Brave New World. And in A Brave New World, it's about people are completely addicted to a little machine that is keeping them entertained all the time. So this is the way for keeping them in control.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
I mean, this was written 1984, and look at the world that we are in right now. So we also have to look a little careful on these things, that we're going completely into these little screens and being mesmerized in it. And entertainment itself is not innocent. It's entertainment in itself is also making us not think a thought that we maybe should be more interesting if we were concerned about.
Robin, I have a last question for you. We've had a long relationship with Gothenburg. It's not been as successful as we had wished for, but we don't want to give up. Many of us have visited the school many times in Gothenburg, and we've had 2 exchange programs as well. And I have never met you. None of us met you, but you were regarded very highly in this school, and I'm very proud of you. I want to ask you a personal question. Would you consider coming to Bangalore maybe the next year or the year after for our film festival? I would love to do that. Yeah, and
I would really love to do that. I have never been in India. I've only been in the airport of Bombay, but never really been in India. So I would love to come to Bangalore, of course.
And we will take you through this, through what we think is important in our part of the world. So come with some time, so we'll take you around.
I would love that.
And if you have a message for our young filmmakers, first-time filmmakers who are participating in the short film festival. We'll just take the message and close this fantastic interview.
Well, one thing that has been very helpful for me is to create a collective, to have a group of friends around me that we are working together. And my great-grandfather, he had an art collective that was called Halmstadgrupp. They were painters. And he told them, you can fight as much as you want, but remember to always stay together, always stay as a collective. Because as a collective, you're much, much stronger than you are if you only are one individual. And the attention on you as a filmmaker will be much greater. As soon as it happens something good for any other person in that collective, it will also gain you. But you have to work together. You can't be alone today. You have to start to try to create like a feeling of you should put yourself on a pedestal. You know, you should create a collective, and you should say we are better than everyone else. And then you should talk about this inside this group, and you should put the bar very high on your expectations on your film. You should be criticizing each other, and you create this so you have fun when you're working. And don't forget, you need to have the 10,000 hours of practice. You have to practice 10,000 hours before you can get good at something. And try to find a way to have fun when you're doing these 10,000 hours. And in order for me to have fun when I'm trying to do this 10,000 hours, I have been filming things that I love.
Okay. Thank you. I think we just froze on that note. It just froze. So thank you very much. Can you hear us? I mean, it just froze your image.
Reload.
Yeah, now. Okay.
Yeah, it just froze there. And
what I was talking about is that you have to be interested in what's in front of the camera. You have to be interested in what's in front of the camera. You can't only be interested in being a director. You have to be interested in what the camera is aiming towards. And the most silly ideas that you love, everything you love, it can be whatever. That's what you should aim the camera for. And I have another suggestion also. If you're interested in small, trivial things that is happening between human beings, always look for a dilemma. A dilemma is something where you have two or more possibilities, but none of them are easy. Always look for situations that have a dilemma in them. I can just bring an example of a dilemma that I used in voluntary. I had a friend that was going on a bus, and he went to the toilet. There was a small toilet on the bus. And the bus then it's a little bumpy road. So he's like grabbing a little curtain that's sitting on the window, and he breaks it. And okay, it's a small plastic curtain. He's not thinking much about it. He puts it back up, and okay, it doesn't work out 100%, but anyway, it goes back to his seat. The bus stops. Everybody goes out to have lunch. And when they're getting on the bus again, the bus driver is very upset. And he's saying, okay, I have found out that there have been some things that have been vandalized on the bus. And he's aiming for a group of youngsters. And he says, you can play loud music and you can have fun, but you can't break this. And my friend is starting to think, is he talking about the curtain, you know? And all of a sudden, it comes up, it's the curtain. And then he have 2 or 3 seconds to say, it was me. But if he misses the chance, then it will be harder and harder the longer the time goes on. And what happens is like, okay, he's not saying anything because he hopes for, okay, he will drive now, you know. But the driver, he goes back to his seat, and instead of driving, he turns off the bus, and he takes the mic, and he says, I will not go any further before the one who did this confesses. And my friend he's a little ashamed that he didn't say anything in the first place. So now he's in a classical dilemma. You have two options: either to say, "Hey, it was me," or not say anything. And both of them are basically equally hard. And then it becomes interesting, because we can identify with the situation as a human being. We're not creating a bad guy or a good guy. It's the situation that is creating the behavior. So look for a dilemma, and then you should always be able to put yourself in the situation of the character. Could you also do the stupid things that they actually are doing? Can we identify with what they are doing? If you can't identify with what they're doing, then you have to try to create a better setup. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ruben. We'll really look forward to this occasion that we can actually see you in person here, and
Yes.
we'll see what we can do with that. Thank you so much.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure.
Good luck with the film festival, and thank you so much for having me.